have the wonderful Dr Tory Clarke.
We've got a biologist talking to us now. So exciting. Keep clapping, keep clapping, keep clapping, keep clapping. Tory is one of the bravest people I know. She came on stage with me in a show called Rumpelstiltskin in the Case of the Missing Grants and did improv. We had 3 scientists on stage with us doing improv, which was great fun. Thank you, Tory. How's the counselling gone since then?
I'm here again, aren't I?
You're here again. She must have loved it. All right, round of applause for Tory.
Thanks, Phil. So I'm Tory. I'm a scientist working at ANU and I'm a plant scientist. And in my research, what I'm doing is trying to improve the way plants grow to make more food for people to eat. So I'm really interested in crop productivity. And my research, I'm just going to talk about my research. No, I'm going to talk about space as well, but I've got you all as a captive audience, so I can't resist a little bit about what I really love. But it's okay because I've made a really cool slide to show you and you're going to love it. So, if I can click. Star Wars! Okay, so my research is about improving the way that carbon dioxide can diffuse inside leaves because we know that we need to convert carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. And so we've just got this little diagram to show you some of the points of resistance. And Princess Leia is our carbon dioxide molecule with her little oxygens as their buns. And these different barriers just represent parts of the leaf. So you have the stomata, which is kind of like the doorway where the pore on the leaf where CO2 can diffuse in and also water can diffuse out. And then you've got barriers like cell walls and cell membranes and liquids. And so in my research, I'm targeting each of these points of resistance to try and improve the way that CO2 can move through them, make them less resistant so we can have more carbon dioxide and more photosynthesis and more food to eat.
So you're trying to crush the resistance. You are the evil emperor.
Okay, but today I'm going to be talking about some of the things we might want to think about if we're wanting to grow plants in space. Okay, so I guess the first question that you might be thinking is why? Like, plants are cool, but why would you want to grow plants in space? And there's actually a range of different reasons why it might be important to have plants in space. Luckily, I wrote them here because I might forget. So plants are really good at filtering water. And so plants collect water through their roots and then it goes through the plant and actually transpires out of the leaves. And through this process, the plants kind of collect some of the toxins and sequester them and they're releasing clean water vapour into the air. And this is actually such an efficient process. It's done by proteins on the membranes of plant cells called aquaporins, and we actually have them in our body as well. And these little channels that only let water through are so efficient that you can actually take these channels and embed them in an artificial membrane and create a water filtration system. And some of this technology is actually being used now in space to filter the water. So it's an active biological process that we're using to clean the water. So plants are great. Fresh air. So Rod talked about this earlier. Plants obviously are converting carbon dioxide into oxygen. It's probably, as he said, not enough, that it's not going to sequester and use up all of that carbon dioxide. But maybe if some of my research is successful, they'll be able to take a little bit more carbon dioxide in and be that little bit more efficient at doing it. So probably the main one that people think about plants in space is food. So when astronauts go into space, like on the International Space Station, they take all of their food with them. But if you're talking about a longer mission or a mission that's further away to Moon or to Mars, which is 6 months away, it's really difficult to take enough food to be able to survive that time. And so you need a way of generating food. And on Earth, all of our food comes either directly or indirectly from plants. And so being able to grow crops that we can eat in space or having a way of generating carbohydrates and proteins to feed our bodies is really important, and plants are the solution for that. And then the last one I put up there is comfort. Aww. And this may sound a little silly, but you can't take your pet to space. And if you're talking about a mission to Mars, it's probably a one-way trip. And you're going to be living a really isolated life. You're going to have a time delay if you want to come back to Earth and talk to people. So if you want to talk to people from Earth, you can't come back. And so actually providing something natural, something from Earth, can actually provide a lot of comfort to people. And I'm sure there's probably many gardeners or maybe people that have some pet houseplants here that can understand what I'm saying here, but the responsibility of taking care and nurturing something and seeing it grow can be really lovely, and that could generate a lot of, mental health and well-being. Also, if you kill your plant in Mars, it's probably going to be pretty sad because you can't just go to Bunnings and buy another one. Okay, so what's happening with plants in space right now? So we have the International Space Station, which is orbiting the Earth, and this is a great testing bed, if you will, for growing plants and doing some of these experiments. And, when people were thinking about putting plants in space, there were a lot of concerns about what the microgravity would be like. We know that plants will respond to gravity. If you grow a plant and you knock it over, it'll correct itself and start growing back up again. And so there was a lot of concerns initially about what's going to happen when you put a plant in space and you've got microgravity environments. And the first plant to grow in space was in 1982, and this was a plant called Arabidopsis, which, if you're a plant scientist like me, you'll know this is our favourite model plant. It's this tiny little thale cress. It's related to mustard. And we use this in a lot of experiments because it's really quick and easy to grow. We know all its genetics, so we can do manipulations and a lot of understanding about it. And this plant, it actually grew okay. So the microgravity didn't actually have that much effect. And what they found was that it's probably other stimulants like light that are sort of directing the orientation of the plant a bit more. So on ISIS, I've got some photos here of some of the vegetables they grow. And they've got this little unit here called Veggie. And it's basically just a bank of LED lights, so to replace sunlight. And it's got a fan in the top, so it's circulating air, and it's kind of encased in this sort of loose plastic covering, just so things aren't flying around and hitting your veggies. And the seeds get sort of planted it's called a spaceflight pillow. They always have to have cool names. But it's basically like a little parcel that's all sealed up, that's sort of got a substrate, a bit like a soil in it, and it's got all the nutrients. And the only thing they really had to do that was different was they had to make sure that they orientated the seed, because the seed has an orientation, the little embryo. It's got a root that comes out one side, and it's got your buds or your cotyledon that comes out the other way to form the shoot. And as long as they orientated that seed so the roots were going down into the substrate and the shoot was coming up towards the light, the plant did the rest. So plants kind of know what they're doing. So, that's one less challenge for us. If you can get the seed there and you can get its environment right, you're going to be able to grow. Since Veggie, they've also got another system that they're testing out on the space station. And this is a more enclosed environment. So this is what we call a temperature or environmental controlled unit. So you can control the humidity, you control the different gas concentrations, you can control the light environment. It's not an open system like this one. Okay, but obviously it's great in space to grow, a couple of lettuces, and you can supplement your diet with that. And again, this comes into the comfort thing. The astronauts reported that they really loved looking after these plants and growing them and looking after them and eating them, because it was a really variation on their diet. But if we're going to think about having something set up on the moon or Mars, we need to have plant growth at scale. And so then you start needing to think about questions like, well, what species are you going to grow? Lettuce is great. It's tasty, it grows really quickly, you can have multiple harvests of it, but it's not going to sustain you. So you need to think about crops that are high in protein, so things like legumes that can do nitrogen fixation. We need to think as well, as I said, about the environmental controls. And you can actually do some really clever things like this. So you can actually reduce the oxygen concentration. Plants don't actually need very high oxygen. If you take it away, they'll actually fix more carbon dioxide. So you can make manipulations if you have a controlled environment like that. We can look at the different lights that we can use and optimise them so that we're giving the correct wavelength to the plant, so they're maximising the energy from that. Something that's a big concern in space, so much space, but space to grow plants. And some of the other people have touched on this, that it's expensive and difficult to take equipment to space, so being able to have room to grow these plants. And this is where you start needing to think about systems where you can have plants growing sort of in stacks on top of each other, and using hydroponic or aeroponic systems. So not even using a soil substrate, you're growing the plants in something that's much more compact than that. And then my last point is managing disease. So space is sterile, but astronauts aren't, and we take our bugs with us. And so on the ISS, there's actually been a fungal infection when they were growing some plants, and the plants nearly died because they got infiltrated by this fungus. And so managing disease, we have to do it all the time on Earth, out in fields when we're growing crops, and it's going to be the same issue in space. And it can be a problem as well when you have these really controlled environments, that if you get your humidity wrong, things can just go crazy. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm finishing it, and I just wanted to end on this picture. So Brad talked earlier about Chang'e, the Chinese capsule that went to the far side of the moon, not the dark side. And in their payload, they had a canister that contained some dirt and some seeds with water and a bit of nutrients in it, had a little hole in it to let the sunlight in, and they actually germinated cotton seeds on the moon. And you can see here these tiny little seedlings are germinating. And it was really exciting. It's the first time something's been germinated on the moon. This was 2019 this happened. But on the moon, the day length is about 14 days, of 14 Earth days. And so these plants germinated in the light and they grew a little bit, and then it turned to the lunar night. And the temperature dropped down to minus 56 degrees and the canister froze. So they died. And they had to wait for the sun to come up so they could rot. But it's exciting, you know, this is the first step, and maybe one day we will have crops on the moon.